What is depression? We could take any generally accepted definition, like for example this one from psychiatry.org: feeling sad, irritable, empty and/or hopeless, losing interest or pleasure in activities you once enjoyed, a significant change in appetite and/or weight, sleeping too little or too much, decreased energy or increased tiredness or fatigue. But that would be boring and kinda soulless. What is depression to the individual? To me? What does it mean to be depressed? Full disclosure, I'm not a professional, nor have I been diagnosed with anything. But I have been feeling depressed, wanting to not live anymore, ever since I was 13 or so. I was once almost forced to stay in a mental health facility for a few weeks because I had a mental breakdown in school and wounds on my arms, and I'm currently in the psychiatric department of my local hospital because I tried to end my life. Diagnoses are good to have something on paper, to be able to give some kind of legitimacy to your feelings, but they aren't necessary to feel and can even be misused, justifying bad behavior with mental illness. Personally, I would like to be diagnosed. The only reason why I wasn't is because I was scared of my parents, who were always super critical of anything mental health related. That's also why I never got therapy growing up, even though I would have really needed it. Over the last few months, I've heard different doctors throw around terms like chronic depression, borderline, social anxiety. But how did it start? And most importantly, how did it get so bad that I ended up here? Of course, it's hard to pinpoint an exact moment. Even just smaller negative experiences from your early childhood are hard to remember, but the big ones stick. And aside from some bullying at school, they usually have to do with my parents. A very controlling mother who had to know every single thing, to the point where I had to explain every cent I spent to her on a weekly basis. And I had to remember every single cent because children are too young to forget anything. Or else. Where I would regularly come home to the sight of her sitting on my bed, reading through some school papers, with the rest of my bag's contents scattered on the floor. Where even things I hid in my room, including gifts for her, would either disappear or be rearranged whenever I left and came back. Nothing was sacred, no secrets were allowed. And additionally, of course, I was always wrong. Bad teachers didn't exist. On the contrary, I was supposed to treat them like kings and queens because they had my future in their hands. And even when quite literally everyone said that the teacher was bad, I was still wrong. My experience didn't matter because I was just a child, and adults are always correct. I had to grow up, soak up knowledge, and probably also get a well paying job before I was allowed to even try to form opinions. And of course, I had to be perfect. Her perfect little boy who would always bring back good grades. And by that I mean that a 3 wasn't even a grade to her because it was so bad. That's literally what she told me. He would be so smart that he would work as a scientist or a lawyer or, when I showed interest for that, a psychologist. The irony of suggesting that while condemning therapists and mental health facilities as a whole was lost on her. I would be one of the good ones, her perfect little boy who would live with his parents until their death. And she's still clinging on to that hope, even though I've been living in another country for over 4 years at this point, and made it very clear to her that I'm not planning to ever come back. She doesn't care. I'm her little boy that she can control and guilt trip, and that's what I will always be to her. And yes, if I wasn't perfect, if I brought bad grades home, if I lost something, if I messed up in any way possible, she would guilt trip me, sometimes even cry, something she does a lot when she doesn't get what she wants. And what she wanted was a perfectionist, and she got one, just in the wrong way. Because now I'm not perfect or even great at anything, even though some people would probably disagree, and I'm super insecure about everything I do. If it's not perfect, or in some cases at least good enough because I've been working on myself, I don't want to show it to anyone. Not even my closest friends, because it's not good enough to show. It's bad, and everyone will think it, and by extension also me, is worthless. Which by extension also means that in my head I am worthless whenever I produce something less than perfect. Asking for feedback on a work in progress is near impossible for me, which is a huge reason for failing my game art studies later on. And going back again, my grades at school were never good either. I was a gifted child who breezed through elementary school, even getting homework for the next year to challenge me a little. I could read German and Russian and count up to 1,000,000 in kindergarten. Elementary school was nothing. I almost skipped third grade and even got a recommendation for the most prestigious school in my entire city. But I never picked up a very important skill during that time: how to study. To this day, I have a hard time with it. So when more complicated classes like chemistry or Latin appeared, I didn't understand anything and my grades dropped drastically, to the point where I was kicked out of gymnasium after 2 years. It's a German school thing. Read the text on screen if you don't know. And of course, these things contributed to my bad self image, my insecurities, and by that point, also my depression. And because it was pointless anyway, I started giving up on homework and sometimes even classes altogether. Somehow I still managed to get the second highest degree in the German school system, but I'm not perfect. Far from it. Very far. My mother tried to raise me to perfection, but created an insecure, depressed piece of work. And yet, somehow, in her head, she was still right all along, because she can't be wrong. She is perfect. A wonderful mother I should be thankful for because she's not a junkie or an alcoholic. So, of course, she always knows better, and everyone should listen. Even when she doesn't, which honestly is the case more often than not. She has to give her 2 cents about everything, even topics she admits she knows nothing about, like computers or construction, and she has to annoy everyone with her unsolicited advice that is usually the dumbest thing anyone could say in these situations. And when she is told that and asked to leave, she doesn't, because she knows better. Of course, it's just annoying in these cases. Even though the annoyance grows unbearable after the 1000th time, there is no real harm done. But what if I, say, disagreed with her choice of curtains for my room? Obviously, her opinion is, well, her opinion, and therefore the better one. But she asked me about my opinion concerning something in my room, and so I told her that I didn't like them. The color, length, everything. And my old ones were perfectly fine. I still don't know why she even felt the need to change them. She had a thing where she was never satisfied. And this time it was my curtains that were wrong. So wrong that I came back from school the next day while she was in the middle of installing them. It kind of upset me. I told her I didn't want them, yet here she was still replacing my old ones. Why did she even ask me at that point? Why not just do it if she was gonna do it anyway? Is my opinion worth anything at all? Her response was, but it's better this way. So I tried to explain that this is just her opinion and that I already told her that I don't want them. A little more back and forth, and she got so deeply upset about me disagreeing with her choice that she started crying and went to another room. And now I had to apologize for making her upset, even though it was her fault to begin with. This happened pretty often, also for much less. She could never be in the wrong, and if she somehow was, with such solid points, sometimes evidence, depending on the situation, that there was no way to talk herself out of it, she would start crying, and you had to apologize to her for upsetting her. Every single time. And the next day, everything was forgotten. Another conflict happens, you bring something from the past up as an example, and it just didn't happen, or you're exaggerating, or she was actually right, or she just didn't hear you disprove her, or whatever else. In the end, she was always right. And to get back to the curtain story, why it was so memorable to me, even though so far it was a pretty normal day in my life, she later came into my room and was just standing there, looking, kind of like a horror movie ghost in her white pajamas, in complete silence. And when I asked what's up, she told me in this really weak and creepy voice to remove the curtains. I finished installing them in the meantime. I told her it's fine, just like I did in my apology to her, to calm her down. But she wasn't having it. She said it multiple times, getting louder each time, and eventually stormed to my window and tried to rip them down. I was holding her back with my whole body, but she still managed to grab some and rip half of it off before my father came and helped me. But that's still just curtains. Still a very inconsequential thing, where me disliking her choice that she still tried to force onto me caused such a reaction. But what if we change the topic a little? What if it comes to more serious things, like mental health? She is a dangerous person. Not a violent one, most of the time, but a manipulative, narcissistic vampire who sucks the life out of everyone who dares to get too close to her. Best seen in my father, who is a mere shell of his former self. I like to describe my mother in some pretty bad terms. And yes, psycho is one of them. Things like the curtain thing kept happening, never to be acknowledged again, because she is a wonderful mother, and if you even so much as imply anything else, she would start crying again. She is perfect, and you are wrong for even trying to think otherwise. Now let me ask you, how would you deal with this situation as a child? She is the person you're supposed to trust the most, but she is also the most toxic one. The one who would always get what she wants, even if it's by guilt tripping you into it or crying. The person who would get angry at you for sometimes no reason at all, honestly. Just for the sport of it, I guess. And the person who you would then hear speak on the phone about everything that happened pretty loudly. Would you trust her with anything? Knowing that your feelings are invalid, your opinions are wrong, and your wrongdoings would loudly be shared with her friends? But everything you did was wrong, some things were just worse than others? Hearing this, is anyone surprised that I ended up being insecure? Having trust issues? Feeling like I don't deserve anything, especially happiness? And then we also have my father, a war veteran who wasn't great at controlling his emotions, in addition to his Soviet Russian upbringing, so he was sort of the enforcer. I was always scared of him. He was a good man somewhere deep down, and I always liked him more than my mother, but my wrongdoings were always punished with a belt, and there were many wrongdoings according to my mother. I remember multiple times during my early childhood that I would threaten my parents with calling the police or child protection services. Even at, I don't know, 10 years old, I knew that this level of physical violence is wrong. And what was my mother's response? If you do that, they will take us away. We will go to jail and you will be all alone. You won't have parents anymore. Do you really want that? And of course I didn't. They didn't change their behavior, didn't see my reaction as a warning sign, and therefore didn't even try to change anything. Because that's how kids were raised in Soviet Russia. So obviously it was right. She clearly turned out well. Instead, she just guilt-tripped me into enduring it. And even before that, when I was even younger, like 7 or 8, before grasping the concept of child protection, I told my mother that I wished I had other parents. She opened the door and told me to fuck off and find some. My cry for help was taken literally, and obviously a 7-year-old child isn't just gonna go away. So when I backed off into my room, I had to listen to another monologue about how great of a mother she is and how I should be grateful. And even though this is how I felt about my parents for most of my childhood, my connection to my father was always stronger than to my mother. He would sometimes come in and have normal small talk, or even allow me little things that my mother forbade as long as she wouldn't notice. These little bits of help were always nice, and when I became an adult, he got much more relaxed. We started bonding a little, and over time even became sort of friends. We would watch movies or shows together, or YouTubers like Chris Ramsey's puzzle solving. And we bonded over that, and were also able to talk about deeper, private things. He even shared some details about the war with me, something he didn't really talk about. I value these moments a lot. It went far enough for me to say that by now I genuinely love him. He is a good man, and I wish him all the best. I was never popular in school. If anything, I was the outsider, the one kid in the back of the class who nobody would even try to talk to. I had friends, but only like 1 or 2 at a time, sometimes down to 0. It was a very lonely time, and later on also one with some bullying. Teenagers can be cruel. The only reason why I didn't look like this back then, and I'm only now exploring it, is because I was too scared of my parents. I looked like your average white boy, which didn't stop some really harmful rumors from spreading, most notably during my last year at school when I was asked to come to the director's office. She didn't want to beat around the bush and straight up told me that there were rumors about me planning to shoot up the school. I hope I don't need to say that that was BS. If anything, I was a danger to myself, not to others. But needless to say, it didn't exactly help with my reputation, and I got even lonelier. I started playing video games much more, by now accumulating over 2,000 games on Steam, and watching tons of movies, because there was nothing else to do. I had no friends, and had been depressed for some time by now. It was a distraction from the crushing feeling of being worthless, of nobody liking me, of not wanting to be alive. It was something to take my mind off of all that, but it wasn't a solution. It was like putting a band-aid on a much deeper problem. Like taking a painkiller against a headache instead of actually treating it by drinking more, for example. You're suppressing it, ignoring it, but it will come back, and chances are it will be worse. The things causing it will continue accumulating, and once the painkillers wear off, the headache is back, worse than ever. Or in my case, the weight of my strict, controlling, violent parents, of failing at school, of having nobody to share these feelings with, feeling completely alone, of being different but not understanding why, seeing myself as a whole, as a failure because of that. Those feelings got to me. The thoughts took over. Anything negative you could possibly think about someone, I thought about myself. Without wanting to, it just happened. I felt hopeless. Not even my distractions helped me anymore. I was trapped in my own head, with my own thoughts that I wasn't able to control. I felt like I was going crazy. sitting on my bed with my hands on my head, asking myself how it came to this point. What went wrong? My childhood was normal, wasn't it? How did I turn out to be such a failure of a human being? And I only saw one way out. The scars on my arms aren't very deep. I'd never hurt myself before and underestimated how much it would hurt. I expected some kind of liberating feeling, because that's what I heard people say they felt after, but I only felt pain. Which, wait a second, only pain? But no, that's not a solution. I didn't want to replace my thoughts with pain and ugly scars. What's the point of that? It felt like postponing the inevitable. And so I tried something else and failed. And then broke down in school the next day because I couldn't bear it anymore. The first time I'd cried in years, and it just came out. I couldn't stop it. I was brought to the secretary's office, who drove me to a mental clinic, and the doctor there, on top of asking some questions, also saw the wounds on my arms. He wanted to keep me there, and honestly, anything was better than to live my normal life. I wanted to stay, but another feeling was even stronger than that: the fear of my parents. They couldn't find out about it, or my life after the clinic would get even worse. Because as we've already established, they don't learn. They lash out. They punish. I was terrified of that and talked my way out of the clinic. Of course, never got therapy either. This was my life now. A juggle between living with my parents, being trapped with my worst enemy up here, and trying to not kill myself. While my classmates probably still thought I wanted to shoot up the school, and while I started to realize that my older brother, who I'd had a lot of respect for, was actually a junkie. And probably worst of all, at least for my parents, I'm just kind of living my life. I figured out that I'm trans. Now, some lobotomites might say that my parents didn't beat me enough, because that surely would have helped, or that I had no father, which just isn't true, or that I just didn't get enough pussy, which, I mean, is true but is unrelated. Because these people like to ignore science the moment it goes against their beliefs. They dismiss many things that all scientists agree on. For example, the brain scans that proved that our brains are wired closer to that of the opposite sex. I literally have a female brain stuck inside of a male body. Having the parts that I have now is deeply wrong and unsettling to me, and every single medical professional I ever talked to confirmed that. But leave it to some GTA 5 Trevor type ass to tell me they're all wrong. That I should see God, even though I have read the entire Bible, which they probably never even tried. People with Bible verses in their bios who go directly against Jesus' teachings in the name of Jesus. Every single thing they say is disprovable with actual facts provided by scientists and scholars, but they don't care, because their belief that I am wrong for changing my own body goes above that. They know better. My parents know better. I was terrified of coming out to them. My life was already hell. Now imagine this on top of that. I knew I was gonna move out to another country soon, and I saw that as an opportunity to start the process and tell them. And while I did start the process, I just couldn't bring myself to say it. I was scared of losing my family, especially my father, who I deeply loved by that point, of being completely alone. Every once in a while I tried to push myself to tell them, but I just couldn't. Something inside of me just contracted and stopped me. But my transition wasn't slowing down. I was talking to therapists, doctors, getting my blood tested, and sometime later, in January 2023, I got my first prescription for HRT, and my parents still didn't know, and I still couldn't get myself to tell them. But this was the big step. I had to tell them now, and I tried hard. Every single time we talked on the phone, I tried to mentally prepare to lose my parents. Every single conversation felt like it would be the last one ever, because I tried to push myself, even started crying on the phone because I knew I would lose them within the next hour or so. They luckily never noticed. Yet still, I couldn't do it. Until one day I visited them, and my visits were never great because, of course, my mother was still my mother, but I knew that this time for real would be the last time I ever see them. And when I sat in the train on a warm sunny day and my parents waved goodbye, I stared at my father, trying to burn this image into my mind, to never forget the last moment I would ever see him while still being his child. I still remember it vividly. The shorts he wore, the shirt, the cap, his smile, his wave. This genuine, loving father who still had a hard time connecting with his emotions due to his PTSD, but who genuinely tried, waving me goodbye for the last time. And he didn't even know it yet. But eventually, of course, I had to come out to them. I was kind of pressured into visiting one more time. There were multiple things I had to take care of, like paperwork I had to be present for, as well as picking up my new passport, and my father was about to go to hospital because his health was deteriorating pretty quickly. There was no real way of talking my way out of it without raising suspicion, so I went. But by that point, there were visible signs, especially around this area, that were hard to hide. And even before, between the two visits, my mother was already questioning why I'm calling them less and if I may be gay or, God forbid, trans. The topic came up sometimes, and it never failed to just terrify me. I somehow still wasn't ready to lose my parents. Mentally preparing for that seemed impossible. But when I visited, this time really for the last time yet, my mother noticed some things that were impossible to hide. But my father refused to believe it, even asked me to stay for a few more days because I was only there to take care of things to give my parents as little time as possible to notice anything. I went on a little walk with him, and he told me how happy he was to see me and how he would love for me to stay for at least another night or two, to give us some time to watch a few movies like we would always do. Telling him that I couldn't was just. So I went back home and decided to come out to them, this time for real. February 2024. It was a very hard phone call, full of screaming and tears on both sides. My mother crying, begging me to reconsider, and my father just quiet. And over the next few days and weeks, I had to listen to some pretty disgusting things, insults, a long message from my cousin telling me that my parents would never accept a like me, among many other things. My mother had really high blood pressure over the next few days, to the point of almost having a stroke, and my father was diagnosed with Parkinson's in the hospital, an untreatable chronic illness that would only ever get worse. You can only slow it down. And the way to do that is as little stress as possible. I hope you can imagine that me being me wasn't exactly helping there. And I hope you can imagine how much I cried over that. Meanwhile, my cousin was insulting me in the worst and most personal ways imaginable, and my brother, seemingly happy, expressed some downright disgusting incestual fantasies for when I'm out of surgery. And this was really all the family I had. So, needless to say, these days it's easier for me to say that I don't have family at all anymore. Because what are we talking about? Is this the unconditional love they would preach to me about? My mother always telling me when I was a child that she would always love me no matter what, even when she screamed at me? Was her now, and still to this day actually, telling me that I would be the cause of my parents' death and regret it for the rest of my life if I continued down this path? Unconditional love? Telling me that trans people are disgusting and that I probably only have gay and lesbian friends here and they just convinced me? Saying in a completely disgusted voice that I'm probably getting in the ass by other men? Is it unconditional love when you don't even try to ask how it came to this point, to understand, and instead resort to insults and disgusting manipulative tactics? Even now, more than a year later, not even trying to accept that some people are different, instead saying how she will be a laughingstock if her friends find out? That she isn't telling anyone, and when I say that I don't care if she does, she suddenly whispers, "What do you mean you don't care? It's so embarrassing." Trying to reassure me by telling me really proudly how I will always be her son and always welcome back home. By the way, why don't I come back home and stop with this bullcrap? They can show me another way of life, where I'm not surrounded by all these gays and lesbians, as if it's some kind of contagious disease that needs to be treated. And she even threatened me with physical violence. And the next day called me again like everything was fine. So when I brought it up to see if she really meant it, or even remembered, she just asked, "What about it? You want me to apologize?" And doubled down on it, saying it again, this time even worse. Luckily, I recorded that call. Shoutouts to the Belgian police. My mother keeps telling me, to this day, that I'm a smart boy, just misguided, and that I should start using my brain. But I guess it's only using my brain as long as it aligns with her outdated and disproven beliefs. She wants me to move back in with her and keep living in my childhood bedroom, which my parents refuse to change it anyway, and be her little boy. To this day, she cries on the phone regularly, guilt trips me, convinces my father of some dangerous things, tells me how good it is that Putin and Trump are implementing anti-trans laws. And when I'm hurt by that, because it comes from her, and ask why she would say such a thing to me, she's just sharing her opinion. Is that wrong? It's just conversation after all. I could go on naming examples of things I've had to listen to over the past year and 3 months, but the one thing I never heard was a why or a how. It's only ever insults, accusations, and blame, and none of that is wrong, because she is a wonderful mother who can do no wrong. All the time. By now I'm just tired of it, but can you imagine how much it hurt in the beginning? It was a hard time. Mentally, I felt stuck. By this point, I knew I would value my own happiness over pleasing my parents. It would be one of the first times I'd do that. I finally wanted to have my life in my own hands, but it came at the cost of my family. Not just whether they are in my life or not, but whether they're alive at all. I am the cause of their despair. I will be the reason for their early deaths, and I would blame myself for that for the rest of my life. The exact things my mother was telling me. But in a way, they are true, aren't they? Things would be very different if my parents were more open to different lifestyles, but they aren't. They refuse to accept anything that's not purely white, cis, and straight. And me not being cis or straight is wrong. Therefore, my entire existence is wrong. And something that's wrong shouldn't exist now, should it? This is the kind of thought I was starting to have again. I went back down a very dark path. The 2 years or so before coming out to them were mostly okay. I wasn't stable, even though I was trying to convince myself I was, but also not suicidal. I started to gain new friends who made things easier and discover myself a bit more, understand my own thoughts, feelings, and emotions better, to become sort of one with myself. But the thing with my parents was just too much. It undid all of that progress, and I started hating everything about myself again, falling into a dark pit of hopelessness and despair. I felt wrong, sad. I was crying every other day, or more. And in the meantime, my own head was trying to rationalize untrue and bad things about myself, about why my friends didn't actually like me, about me being unpleasant to be around, not a fun person to hang out with, and not a good enough person to deserve anyone to hang out with. I am alone in this world, and it's causing me lots of bad feelings and thoughts. I'm constantly asking myself why. How did it get to this point? But at the same time, I feel like I deserve it, and I want to punish myself even more. Because even the slightest bit of happiness, of positivity directed towards me, is so deeply undeserved that I have to make up for it in other ways. I had to feel some kind of pain. And just as I was about to act on it, I got to know the person who would become my new girlfriend. She was wonderful. She genuinely loved me and always made sure to show it. I didn't know why. I didn't understand it. But I didn't have to. I just had to enjoy. She made me feel good again. For a brief few weeks. I'm not gonna go into detail because it's pretty recent, but basically she was love bombing me in the beginning, only to then lash out all the time and pick fights for no reason. With a few hours or sometimes days in which she was the person I got to know again. This wonderful, loving human being that her friends also described her as. She could still be that, I just had to hold out. But she never was, only to her friends. Her attacks directed at me grew stronger, even going into my trauma and my insecurities, and attacking me with those. Absolute low blows that hurt almost as much as her basically cheating on me with a good friend. That entire relationship, in hindsight, was super toxic, and when she sucked me dry and left a miserable pile of work, she broke up with me. And for the next month and a half, all I did was try not to kill myself. Some days refining my plan, some days being just miserable and being trapped in my own head with all these bad thoughts, and some days, the good ones, I was able to distract myself with things like research for YouTube videos or writing scripts. But these good days got less and less, and the very bad ones got more and more, especially when something bad happened. Every negative experience was felt 1,000 times worse. Me being late was not just me being late anymore, it meant that I am a mistake on a fundamental level and should be erased, whereas every positive experience was just neutral, I guess. Going to a fair with some friends, finishing a long project, sex, all that wasn't really good. I just took it for granted. They were just experiences, not positive and not negative. Because my baseline was so skewed that these otherwise very good experiences were only able to get me to a neutral level, and sometimes not even that. There was a moment at the fair where I was lost in my self-deprecating thoughts. This feeling of pressure that kept rising, everything going more and more blurry, and all the sounds around me growing more muted as the thoughts started to take over about how I'm worthless and should just finally end it. And I could feel the tears coming, because there was no escape from this. I just wanted it to end. Until a close friend tapped me on the shoulder and asked if everything was okay. And that was a good day. Imagine how the bad ones were. Like the one I had 3 days later, the one that landed me here. 26 hours in the ER, which is apparently a really long time over here, with IVs and stuff. A night in the psychiatric emergency department, and now in the normal psychiatric department. As of recording this, I have been in this department for exactly 2 weeks. Or it's gonna be 2 weeks and half an hour, I guess. And I still don't know when I'll leave. But of course, just being here didn't magically heal me. I was still struggling, still am. Being alive felt wrong, because that wasn't the plan. I wasn't meant to be here anymore, and my plan was to correct that mistake the moment I got home. But over time, I started to get used to living again. I didn't break down during therapy anymore, and was actually able to participate. Somewhat. I was even able to forget that I wanted to kill myself sometimes, until I got an email saying that I lost my job, 8 days after my suicide attempt, when I was just starting to reconnect with life. It was honestly incredible timing that the nurse I trusted the most came into my room to check on me minutes after I started breaking down. I was fully convinced that I would kill myself in this room that night when nobody would notice. I'd already made a pretty robust plan during these 8 days, but she somehow knew exactly what to say and do at all times throughout the day. She helped me incredibly well to the point where that same evening I was somehow feeling okay. She honestly deserves a raise or something for that, because holy shit. And things stayed on that general level ever since. Of course I know I'll have to find a job, but I have enough savings for now, so I can concentrate on healing to a certain degree first. And it feels kinda good to have people care about me more than once a month. I am still far from good. I mean, right now I would say I'm back to the state I was in before coming here, but it's a step up. And I'll still be here for some time, so maybe they can patch me up enough to be able to go back to my regular life and have a normal therapist take over. But in a way, I still feel invalid. A feeling I've had ever since I was, 16, where it feels like I didn't suffer enough to be depressed, because I'm not a recovering addict, was never kicked out from home or whatever else. Even here in the hospital, whenever they ask me how I feel and I say anything but horrible, when they ask me how it is with the suicidal thoughts and I say anything but I want to kill myself, I can't help but think that I'm wasting their time, because my case is clearly not bad enough. Because I told them multiple times that I want to die, even that I had a specific plan and wanted to do it the next night, so nurses were extra careful, but nothing ever happened. It feels like me being here is just an annoyance for them at this point, a run-of-the-mill attention-seeking annoyance. And that feels bad in its own right. It brings the thoughts back. Thoughts that I need to punish myself for wasting their time, and for failing at therapy because I'm thinking that I'm wasting their time. Thoughts that grow louder and louder, take over more and more, with therapists sometimes snapping me out of them during therapy. But they keep coming back. The only thing I deserve, the thing I need to feel, is pain. And so I hurt myself, had an adrenaline rush and couldn't stop, just kept going. It hurt, but in a good way. It's what I deserved for being the way I am. The nurses reacted quickly and gave me a rubber band that I could snap against my wrist instead, with no permanent damage. Kind of like a fake cigarette for someone who wants to stop smoking. It's not the same, but it somewhat gets the job done. But I already know that it's just another band-aid, another painkiller. And I already know that once I feel significantly worse again, that I will... I don't know who or what I am anymore. I am Jen, I guess. And I am very likely suffering from chronic depression. Thanks for your attention.